I'm not here to say what's right and what's wrong with palm kernel, whether you should use it or not, but I want to talk a little bit about FEI and how you can still quite effectively use palm kernel in your feeds and you shouldn't be worried about it. FEI is a measure of one type of fat making it into the milk and actually being at a high proportion. And this is the key part to it, right? It's the proportion of this fat or lauric acid in the milk. You can effectively, and as many people have said, dilution is the solution. So what we mean by dilution in the solution is not really in the feed. We're talking about dilution in the fat, or the fat in the milk. So there's three primary areas of milk fat. One is fat to fat, so that's fat that we eat from the diet and ends up in the milk. Now this is where our lauric acid comes in from the palm kernel, but does anyone know the biggest source of fat in the milk? It comes from this stuff. Ryegrass. Ryegrass is significantly our biggest proportion of fat in the milk, with anywhere with readings of 3 to 4%, often up to 6 to 7% of fat. The second one is de novo fat, right? So de novo fatty synthesis happens in the udder, and it happens from acetate. Now acetate is the VFAs that generate from fibre digestion in the rumen. So a good, happy, healthy rumen digests all the beautiful fibre that we grow in New Zealand. That acetate ends up in the udder and turns to milk fat, and it becomes a very large proportion of our milk fat. So our fat to fat can come from fats in the diets. Then we have back fat to fat as our third one. So that's when we're stripping cows off in spring. Cows are losing weight, they're pumping out a lot of milk, and they're getting a lot of fat come off their back fat. And that fat goes straight into the milk. So if we think about those three primary fats, we've got back fat to fat, we've got fat to fat, and we've got de novo fat. So it's really only our fat to fat that can cause an issue. Now, autumn is our biggest risk time because we lose one of those three issues, one of those three fat sources. Those three fat sources, the one we lose, of course, is back fat, because we're no longer stripping it off the cow, we're rebuilding it onto the cow. So suddenly our fat proportions in our milk are made up of fat to fat from the diet, so at risk of lauric acid, and our de novo fatty synthesis, which in other words is our fibre to fat. If we look at a survey data that we generated across our customers, we find that we have extremely very, very low incidences of FEI, and we can pinpoint the situations where we do have some FEI issues, and it's when animals are not fermenting fibre correctly. The biggest risk to that in New Zealand is hungry animals. And I don't mean hungry over a 24-hour period, I mean hungry for 2 to 3 hour short periods during the day. The classic system that leads to this is feeding a high energy feed, like a grain or a turnip or a fodder beet, calculating how much your cows should eat off a megajoule basis, and then actually not providing enough dry matter in their diet. So you have cows who are hungry, they do not have adequate gut fill, walking around a paddock, bellowing, wanting more feed, even though you've given them the adequate amount of megajoules. The key is to keep your cows full. It's the biggest issue in New Zealand for a lot of reasons, but it's also the biggest driver of FEI, not palm kernel. Keep your cows full and you should be able to feed quite a bit more palm kernel than you think.